hello everyone to our webinar called Virtually International, How Virtual Meetings Can Help to Avoid Flights. This webinar is organized by Stay Grounded and Zurich Flying. I'm happy that we already have so many participants here all over the world. My name is Michaela Leitner. I'm a campaigner for Stay Grounded, and one part of my work is to create and collect resources and make webinars for organizations that want to adapt a travel policy that is favoring grounded means of travel and also really tries to reduce air travel. I organized this webinar together with Susanne Hanger-Kopp. Susanne works at the Institute of Applied System Analysis in Austria and also at the ETH Zurich in Switzerland. And she's also part of Zurich Flying, who are a campaign partner of Stay Grounded. Susanne will facilitate the discussion today. Zurich Flying is also focused very much on engaging universities. You can also see it that many participants actually are from universities, but also from NGOs. We also, together with Zurich Flying, we create different kinds of resources. One is a guide with 9 steps to implement a grounded travel policy that's quite new now. I will post the link in the chat later, and also in the summary of the webinar, we will share it. So we are happy if you read it and disseminate it. Right. Maybe some words for those who don't know yet who is Stay Grounded. We were founded 2016 in Vienna, and we are a global network of more than 160 member organizations, all kinds of groups like airport opposition, climate justice groups, NGOs, trade unions, initiatives that promote night trains or support communities that are struggling against offsetting projects or biofuel plantations. What do we aim for? We want to exchange experiences and support each other, and also campaign together for a real reduction of aviation. And by doing so, also countering the focus mainly of the aviation industry on offsetting emissions and biofuels. So really aiming at an actual degrowth of aviation. We also have a position paper that you can read on our website. And this whole webinar is part of the Let's Stay Grounded campaign. We have several pillars we focus on. One of them is organizations that we want to support in grounding their travel policy. Yes, so far from us. Now some introductory words to the webinar and the topic to the webinar. As you maybe have noticed, more and more organizations are actually questioning the climate impact of their business air travel. And this business air travel has been, like air travel in general, on the rise for decades. And also business air travel is the cash cow for many airlines. So airlines make actually a lot of profit. We have found a number that business class travelers are typically twice as lucrative for airlines than economy class travelers. But they are also, business class travelers are also emitting 3 to 4 times more CO2 per kilometer than a passenger in economy class. So that's also an aspect you have to think about. And the other reason why it's so very useful and important to talk about business air travel right now is that, as you all know, the Corona crisis has shown us that it's actually possible to organize everyday international work and also even global events virtually without having to take a plane. And this collective experience seems to have also fundamentally changed ideas about the need for frequent business travel. There was, for example, a recent survey of the views of Fortune 500 chief executives, and 91% of them actually said that business travel will become less frequent and be replaced by video conferencing. So there's also a cultural shift going on in the business sector and NGO sector and in the workplace generally. Still, I have to add that not all, of course, not all Corona-related measures are necessary to avoid plane travel. For example, home remote work for local teams. That's something that doesn't necessarily reduce air travel, commuting travel, yes, but also negative experience of caring for your children while having to work from home at the same time. This is something that we have to separate and differentiate a bit between measures that are related to Corona and are related to air travel. Yeah. But remote work for international teams can help to reduce air travel. And this is the topic of our webinar today. Just a note that we will not focus so much on big online events or conferences, but this is another subject that we might explore in the future. And if you are interested in this, we have already collected some resources on this topic on our website too. So in recent months, many of us became expert in using virtual communication in our work context. And even though maybe not all of these experiences might have always been positive, and we also want to discuss the negative or difficult ones in this webinar, they surely are very valuable because it's really crucial to build on them and at least partially institutionalize them, for example, in the form of a new travel policy, so that business air travel can really be reduced in the long term and also beyond the current phase of travel restrictions. Okay, that's enough from me. I think I will go now to the agenda for today. So after our introduction, I'm very happy to have Lorenz Hilty, a professor at the Department of Informatics at the University of Zurich, and he also heads the Informatics and Sustainability Research Group. Speaking today, his research centers around the question of how the digital transformation can be leveraged for sustainable development. And he also stays on the ground personally himself, so he has first-hand experience. And in his input, he will tell us how virtual communication can help to reduce the CO2 footprint of organizations, how it should be designed, and how it can be as little harmful to the climate as possible. Our second speaker today will be Stanislav Reimgen. He's the co-founder and design lead of BIG, an impact studio. He will dive into the questions, how do teamwork and leadership have to change when working remotely? What are technical solutions for collaborative work? And how can virtual meetings be designed to be motivating? Aeschbach Nicole will be our third speaker today. She will have an input about a survey launched by the ETH Zurich and the Heidelberg University. And in this survey, university researchers and teachers were asked about their experiences during the Corona crisis with virtual work. So I guess that's very interesting. And Nicole is a researcher at the TdLab Geography at the Institute of Geography at Heidelberg University. Yeah, thank you very much for all participating and giving inputs. And I'm also actually really looking forward myself to it because we at TdLab are working remote nearly all the time. And I think I can also myself learn a lot from the inputs today. The second part after the inputs of our webinar will be a more interactive part since, as I mentioned before, you all have become experts in designing and conducting virtual meetings yourself. And we really want to hear from you and your experiences. How did it work? Did it work to reduce flights for you? Is it easy or difficult? In which contexts? How can we actually learn from it? And I think that's a very important question, to not return to business air travel as usual again. And for this part, we also invited two guests to give short insights. Robin Müller from Climate Kick, who work remotely with different tools, and Leonard Speth from the ETH Zurich, who are involved in a lot of international field research, which is a very hard area to reduce air travel in. Yeah, before we go over to the inputs, I want to show a little bit who is here. I have asked you some questions at the registration that you kindly answered. So among the registered participants, we have many from the UK, Germany, Belgium, and Austria. But we also have some from India, Nepal, United States, Canada, and so on. So I guess we are a very international crowd, which is great. I also asked, how often do you actually use virtual communication in your work context? And you really see by the answers that it's very pervasive. So nearly everyone, 96% very often or sometimes use it. So actually, as I said before, we are all confronted with it every day. Another question was, how often could you actually avoid flights by using virtual communication? And here also more than the half say they could do it very often or sometimes at least. And then maybe a not so serious question because it's really hard to answer. We asked it also because we feel this online fatigue. It's very much talked about, that people are really tired of Zoom meetings already. So we thought we just want to have some emotional feedback from you. How do you feel about currently using virtual communication in your work? Actually, still a quarter still says, I totally love it. And the other ones, the majority is more ambivalent about it. I mean, there are negative and positive sides, but actually no one hates it, which is a good sign, I guess. Yeah, and I think that's a perfect lead to our inputs that we'll start right now, maybe to give also some hints on making virtual communication more agreeable. So I give over to you, Lorenz. Please share your presentation. I will stop mine.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
So, thank you very much for the opportunity to present some basic ideas and experiences about virtual meetings. We have tried to make virtual meetings beneficial both for the users, so creating good user experience, and at the same time we were interested in the carbon footprint of the meetings themselves for quite some years. So this is what I'm reporting is completely independent of the Corona crisis, which helped us to make a step towards that, to the practice. But these studies began much earlier, 10 years ago. And I just want to share some, as I said, some basic ideas with you. First of all, interesting question is, well, why should we want to transmit video when we meet remotely? Because there is also the telephone, and it has worked for 100 years. Yes, if you have bilateral meetings, you actually are very used to just take the phone, and you usually the additional value of having a picture, having a video is not really high. But if you talk to more than one person at the same time, if it is maybe on the other side there are several people, or everybody is sitting in his or her home office, then it becomes relevant to have a video, because first reason, you might want to see who is talking if you don't know all the voices already. Yes, you may have the experience with all these audio conferences with 25 people, and it's chaotic very often, and so it is a great advantage to see who is talking. It's a great advantage to see non-verbal reactions of the people. So if I try to make a joke, and then I can see if someone is laughing or didn't understand it or so, and you can see whether someone is trying to say something or is sleeping, and this is really important, for example in teaching, but also in meetings, of course. And the hardest point actually to realize with video is to make pointing gestures understandable. So if I, for example, if I now if I point to the picture of Michaela, it's there. You cannot guess where I'm pointing because you do not see my situation here. And this is a basic problem. So if we do pointing, we need some additional help, like a pointer. Yes, I think you see my mouse pointer. And so it's better than nothing, but it's not the same as sharing a physical room and understanding where somebody is looking at, where somebody is pointing at. Okay, so some experiences results from a field study we did in 2009. There was the first World Resources Forum, not the World Economic Forum, but the World Resources Forum, much smaller, held in Davos in Switzerland, and at the same time in Nagoya in Japan. And we tried to use then best video conferencing technology to create the feeling among these 500 participants to be on at one event. Yes, to be like the feeling that there is that this is one event, including all the informal communication that is very often the reason why you really travel to an event. And so we had these two venues, the conference center in Davos and an auditorium at the University of Nagoya, and we equipped them with the best then available video conferencing technology. And so what we wanted to find out with this field experiment is what forms of virtual presence were accepted by the participants. What can we do to deal with the different time zones? So it is a little bit strange, because if you are, when you are taking the plane, it's your own responsibility to deal with the time lag. Yes, so you have a jet lag, and then you are sort of a hero because you are experiencing enduring this jet lag. And so on. But if you have virtual conferences, nobody likes to stand up at 3 o'clock in the morning to follow this conference. So there must be workarounds for that problem. And the question was then also, how much CO2 emissions caused by travel did we save by this experiment? So we asked all people, what would you have done if the conference would only have been at the other place? And many, of course, would not have taken the efforts to go there. So it's, but we can calculate how much we can have saved. And then this was one of the first attempts also to find out what the IP connection for 3 days for these 8 channels of video conferencing did cost in terms of CO2 emissions. So this was the setup in Davos. What you can see here is a speaker from Japan and the slides. So this is very normal. Something a bit more special is that you can also see here the other audience. So this is the audience in Japan in full life size, actually, so that the speaker also can see who is listening on the other side or asking a question. Then we had such Q&A sessions where I have shown this picture before, where the speaker then almost can have eye contact with the people discussing, which is really helpful for the atmosphere, for discussion. And we also accounted for the fact that people want to have informal communication during breaks. So after each morning in Switzerland, this was then evening in Japan, we had a common lunch or dinner break. Lunch break in Switzerland, dinner in Japan. And there then we had these so-called telepresence kiosks just in this area, and you could just informally talk to people whom you knew or whom you didn't know before on the other side. And surprisingly, this was accepted very well by the participants. They were talking about food and having fun, so on. Okay, so then the evaluation showed that we had avoided 70 to 80 intercontinental flights, which is then in CO2 quite something, because every flight between Zurich and Nagoya would have been 3.6 tons at least per person. And the whole video conferencing for these 500 in total participants on 8 channels for 3 times 8 hours per day was less than a ton. Yes, and even if it's a bit more or less, these numbers are disputed, but the order of magnitude is not disputable. So it's less than 1 flight we have to save to compensate for that for the footprint of all that video conferencing. So, but what does it really make a good experience for the users? And there are some basic things that are often forgotten. So first point, when listening, I should see the person speaking and where he or she is pointing at. Second, when speaking, I should see the people, or at least some of the people who are listening. That creates much better atmosphere. At the moment, I only see one person, but this is much more than zero. It's not a nice experience to talk into a black hole, so to speak. So, audio quality is, by the way, more important than video quality. This is often forgotten. Then there are even video conferencing solutions you can buy to place on your table, which have a horrible sound. So check this before you buy something. The sound must be really clear, otherwise it is very stressful. You may know that from your own experience. And the delay is a very important quality issue in human communication. If you have too much delay, too much latency, then you have this problem that you are talking into the speech of the other one. And so end-to-end delay should be below 150 milliseconds, which is quite fast. So most today's video conferencing tools maybe have difficulties to reach this, even when you have a perfectly high bandwidth and everything. We can make a little test for our current connection in a minute. You will see that then. The delay must be the same for audio, video, and the mouse pointer. So if I'm pointing here, and if this takes some systems delay this by a second, and then I'm talking already about something else, but you see the pointer at the old place. This creates misunderstandings and bad feelings in presenting. Coming back to this time zone problem, I think the only solution, because you cannot force people to wake up at night or stay up long for video meetings. The only way, if you have a longer workshop or conference or something, is that you define time windows where everybody can easily attend, and reserve these for the really global content. And then you have other time windows where only the local people or part of the hubs can take part. And then you do something regional or local and share the results then globally again, report back to the plenary, to the global plenary, when you have a good time window for everybody. That's the only solution I ever found to this problem. Second, informal virtual communications should also be possible. So for the break, or at least if you have a meeting. By the way, we had this today. It was quite okay. Half an hour before it was already open, and we could chat a little bit and get to know each other before the official part starts. And during the breaks, you can keep it open, etc. If you do not want to have this extra hardware for this, for the coffee break area with this telepresence kiosks. Okay. Now, what comes next? I think, yes, frequent pitfalls. We do the experiment at the end if there is enough time. Yes, okay, so I've finished my slides first. Frequent pitfalls. So the camera should be there where people are looking at. Otherwise, you have this virtual squint. Yes, so these are very old examples. This guy is looking at the picture he has from me, but I think always if this guy is talking to me, he's not looking at me. So this is called the virtual squint, and this creates a much better feeling actually. Sorry, that was too fast now. So the camera must be ideally on top of the screen, and you display the other people also in the upper area of your screen, and then you have eye contact. So I'm doing this now. I now have you exactly 5 centimeters below the camera, and if I'm looking at you, you might think that that this is a normal situation. Okay, but if I put your picture, let's say on the at the bottom of the screen now, and now I'm talking to you, Michaela, especially, you don't really feel that I'm addressing you, and this makes a difference. These little things make huge difference. Background noise is a huge problem. Yes, some people open the window and there's traffic noise, and this traffic noise is even amplified for the listeners on the other side, and then you have the incredible bad sound. If you cannot avoid this, then you should just take a headset. It's of course more natural talking without the headset, but if there is background noise or people disturbing in the background, then you need a headset. And wireless LAN is not always stable. Sometimes after an hour or two, it starts beginning unstable. So you are much safer for a good connection if you just use the good old LAN cables to connect to the router. And yes, in terms of CO2, oops, where is the CO2? Ah, here, okay. In terms of CO2, there's much discussion, as you may have read about this. Some people pretend this is one video stream is 1,000 watts. This is not true. It's around 50. It's something between 20 and 200 watt per video stream, and this is not so much compared to using a car or even an airplane. So it's easy, but the access networks make a difference. So if you use a cellular network to accessing the internet for doing video conferencing or any form of video streaming, this is the worst option. Yes, in 10 years from now, 5G may be better, but at the moment, I would recommend to use your fiber to the home via wireless LAN, or even better, just the conventional local area network patch cable, and then you are really low energy. Okay, that was actually my input, and now we can. Do we have still a minute?
Yes, we do.
You do. Okay, then I must switch off my. I take this camera now, and I will show you this other screen. Now I have to accept something. This is not what I wanted. Oh, okay. Not perfect. Okay, this is now. This is Murphy's Law. Just a second. I prepared something that is now clustered. But there is now some advertising on it, which it's exactly not what I wanted. So, oh my God. Ah, here it is. Ah, okay. Yes, this is what I wanted, and now I have to stop. I have to stop my blur, and then what you should see now, I also have to stop screen sharing. You should now see on my computer a metronome, okay? You can see the metronome. And now you see a second computer where you see yeah, exactly. This is what I need. Where you see it's not so easy. But you see then now the delay. The metronome on the right side is transmitted through our video conferencing connection now, and you see that is a bit that it is a bit delayed. So why is this so difficult now to show? This is really not easy. Okay. But can you see that?
Yes, I think we can see it pretty well.
You got it. Okay, that's the idea. So it's maybe a bit more than 150 milliseconds here. And that's the point. So I stop this now. Okay. So yes, thank you. That was actually all what I wanted to show and say.
Thank you, Lorenz. This is really interesting, particularly the early times of virtual meetings. I found quite inspiring. Now we have time for questions and answers. I see that there is one already in the chat, which leads me to remind you of just putting in a little asterisk if you would like to talk, and then we have a speakers list. But I'm also happy to read you, obviously, the questions down there. Günther Getzinger is wondering whether the calculations could be made available that get you to the different numbers.
Yes, this is published. There are papers on that. They are also in my slides. So if we make the slides available, then you can there also get to the publications, or send me an email and I can send you the papers. No problem.
I think we can, if the papers are available, we can share both, if that's okay with you, both
yes,
your slides and the papers that are then directly available with maybe a short summary.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions? Because I do have a couple, but I really do not want to cut dinner ahead of people. But maybe while people ponder what they've just heard, you could give us a bit of context on this sort of first study that you did in 2009, and also whether there have been any follow-up studies later on, or whether you are in the progress of maybe studying the new situation during COVID.
Well, unfortunately, the World Economic Forum didn't repeat this. Although it was a successful experience, they didn't have the resources or the organizational power actually to do this again as a multi-hub conference. We could also think of more than 2 hubs. Yes, you could have at least on each continent 1 hub or so, but unfortunately this didn't work out. Although it was successful, and we did some conference organized actually by ETH. So I think someone of you is also working for ETH. I'm not, but I was part of this. It was 2017. There was a multi-hub conference with 10 universities talking about university air miles reduction. You may have heard of that conference as well, or even been part of it. And there it was really with 10 hubs and local working groups working together locally, and then sharing some results of the discussions via the global sessions. Yes, and that also worked quite well, although the equipment was not better than 10 years ago. We had enormous delays using really good video conferencing. Sometimes I don't understand why this is not prepared with more care. Yes, and we had bad sound, etc. But nevertheless, of course, it was also a successful conference, and what we tried there is also to have this, instead of having 1 or 2 packed days, we had only a few, let's say 2 hours per day, but this was then sprinkled over, I think, more than a week. Yes, the whole conference, and yes, this has also some danger, because people they tend not to be really at this conference. They have it running as something aside, in parallel to any other activities we have to do, and this can also a bit yes, reduce the feeling of really being together at the conference and trying to yeah.
I'm sorry, we have questions coming in and people have been typing them into the chat. I would still like to invite you to say them out loud, if you will. So Lucy, would you mind stating your question?
Hello. I was just wondering what kind of methods did you use to find out all these really interesting facts about how people, or how much do people accept these different techniques, and what methods did you use?
Yes, as you suspected, it was just a questionnaire we distributed among the participants, and you find it also in the first paper from 2011. You will find this some more details about the methodology. We had a social scientist who did this with just a standard survey. So.
Okay, thank you so much.
Then I would like to ask Vivian, would you like to post your question?
I think Vivian said she doesn't have sound, so maybe...
Oh, okay. In that case, I'm happy to read it out. Thank you for pointing that out. Vivian asks, in our online meetings, the main problem is that socializing almost never happens, or not as much as physically, yet it is important for good projects. Lorenz, you mentioned you had some kind of speed dating. Maybe you could elaborate on this.
It was not exactly speed dating. It was just standing at these tables for the coffee breaks or the lunch break, and then there were these telepresence kiosks where you saw some people from the other side that were there just by chance. Yes, so it was nothing planned about this, nothing planned, nothing organized, and just people started to have informal connections then. So that's actually what we did. Yes, and what I think is that yes, so really socializing with people you have never seen at the same place before. This might also take some time until this becomes part of our culture. Think of the telephone. Yes, in the first decades of the old analog telephone, there was a butler taking the telephone, and this was not really an informal process to make a phone call. Yes, so only rich people who could afford a butler had a telephone. And maybe this just will also take some time until we get better in building trust, even in such a setting.
Thank you. I hope we can discuss maybe experiences from other participants then later on in the second half of the session. I would like to ask Mark Redman, would you like to say aloud your question?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the opportunity. Absolutely fascinating presentation. I enjoyed it very, very much indeed. I'm curious to know if, as we see these more sophisticated virtual platforms emerging and being used for more sort of complex and creative online participatory processes, with platforms such as Mural, I'm just wondering whether or not it's likely that these more sophisticated platforms are actually have less of a favorable carbon footprint than normal video conferencing, or can we just assume that basically anything online essentially carries the same footprint? Thanks.
Okay, so as I said, there is some discussion about how much a video stream costs. And I think that's the major thing. If you have a server running that does some additional things, I don't think that this makes the whole energy balance much worse. So, but I have no data on that. It's just the experience that if you that there are some really really computational intensive applications such as deep learning or so, or Bitcoin mining that are dominating today what you can gather energy with servers. But I think just doing some video processing is maybe not the biggest thing, but transferring video is of course the most intensive form of data you can transfer through the internet. But still, this transfer, of course, it depends on the resolution. On the average, let's say YouTube video is something like 50 watts. Yes. If you have higher resolution or many videos now, then this can also pile up a little bit, of course. But yes, I think it's in the same order of magnitude. I don't know if this sufficiently answers your question.
No, it does. That's excellent. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. I would like to take one more question from Sean, and then I would like to ask Carla to really keep this point for the discussion later on. I think this is a great, it would be great to hear from your experience. So Sean, would you like to pose your question?
Yeah. Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. So yeah, obviously the event you talked about was a very large scale event and almost certainly had a lot of technical support. And you can obviously correct me if I'm wrong on that. But how can we use the learnings from that with all the small individual meetings that we've got with maybe 2, 3, 4, 10 people even, where there's just one person managing everything that they're trying to do the technical side, they may be chairing the meeting as well. How do we manage that as one person potentially with little technical support?
If you have to do everything as one person to create a good video conferencing experience, I think you just have to practice. It's always, also for me, there's always something going wrong, and then I think I'm wasting the time of the other people. You saw it today. So something it's always happening that is not as it should. But I think this is just, well, I hope that also the software is getting a bit better, more usable in the future, but we just need to have some practice maybe to get the skills. Of course, it's better if you can share the workload. Yes, if, for example, for the chat, if you have someone looking and reading at the chat what is relevant and concentrating on that, and the other one concentrates on keeping good sound and checking whether this works, etc. So for really I would say technically more demanding setups, you need a crew that just is looking for the technology and gives you as the participant a good feeling that everything is safe and nice. So it's the same as when you take a flight. It's not that they place the infrastructure there, the airplane, and say, yes, that's your plane, now do it. It's that you have a cabin crew who takes care of you and serves some drinks, etc. And maybe we need more of that culture also for virtual meetings. And maybe we need a sort of a business class virtual meeting, just to be more competitive against this enormously destructive way of traveling we are all used to, or were used to. Yeah.
Thank you, Lorenz. So I think I agree. We do need some patience, right? As well, we cannot expect things to work right away. I mean, I'm still surprised in presence and analog meetings how the technical problems seem to be never ending for all sorts of technologies. Thank you so much. I am wondering whether Stan will be also giving some very interesting insights to some of these questions. So let's move on to his presentation. Stan,
hey everyone.
Hi.
Sure, thanks a lot. So I would like to share some of the experience I learned and my team learned this year, because we started our company this year as a completely remote design studio, and we focus on sustainable innovation. That means we ourselves are remote, and we work with clients spread across Europe who are also obviously remote. So we could see what works for us, but we could also see what works best for different companies and how are they doing this. So I want to just share some of the best practices, and in general, I think we have to talk. The main thing I want to address first is that remote is a different thing, and before we have to think before we go into a meeting and we think which tools are best to use to set up a meeting. I think the bigger question is, how many meetings and what kind of culture do we need at all? And the biggest lesson I learned so far is per se understanding that remote culture is a lot more about management and leadership than it's about tools, right? So doing the same thing, which we did for the last 50 years, how we worked in an office environment, just does not work in a remote setting. So we have to ask ourselves, do we need the same meetings at all? Before thinking what kind of tools do we use to facilitate communication and do meetings. And the good news is that there are many companies, successful companies, who have been working remote for the last 5, 10, 15 years or even more. Basecamp is probably one of the most ones which people might know, and they started 20 years ago as a remote company, and they have a bunch of resources which everyone can read. And I will share also all of the names of these companies and the resources I would recommend in the talk afterwards. WordPress is a company which manages over 1,000 people. Envision has over 1,000 people, and they all are remote, mostly companies. So, there's a lot we all can read and find and learn from these companies because they share most of those things online. But when people ask me, what is it that how can we manage the meetings in the best case online? What we answer usually is like, look, you have to understand what do companies and teams really need. And the best thing about remote setting is that it really brings a lot of freedom to different people. And I'm really glad you've posted this results of the questionnaire you asked before, because most of us, at least in this group, apparently really enjoy working remote, right? Most of us are very positive about this. And this is a great thing, right? Because remote brings a lot of the good things. So the big question for us as managers is, how do we embrace this freedom of remote culture by managing the downsides of this? And one of the things I also seen, and let me look it up in my notes, what I have here, is when we worked with Microsoft this year, it was really interesting. We've been the project was about 20 people, and it was really amazing to see how asynchronous communication worked a lot better than synchronous communication. So, what we've been doing pretty much for the most of the time, it was me here in Munich, and most of the team was spread between Amsterdam and some other places. Before having a meeting, we would just usually write down a presentation, and we would just share it between the people, and everyone could see it, comment, before we even met online. And most of the cases, we didn't even meet at all. That means we could talk about the information without having a meeting and being in the same room in the same time. Like right now, we are at this conference call and it works great. Like we didn't have to fly to be in a certain room, but we are still in the same time, in the same place. What we could do instead of having this meeting and keep everyone engaged as well is, we could share the same information in written form between each other, and we could give each other time and space to think about this and to read before we would meet. And maybe we wouldn't need to meet at all. We could simply put it in written form. That means that everyone of us could literally read and participate in this information in any given time from anywhere, right? So that's a massive advantage of the remote communication. And I think it's really a big question where we constantly need to address, and we can use this time right now, the time of change, to ask ourselves, where do we really need meetings where everyone is present, even if it's online? Or what kind of things can we replace in written form and we can just share? And I feel like this is definitely one very big thing. The other part is, and this is what, I think someone mentioned in the comments, with the danger of the virtual meetings and having less meetings is that you might communicate and socialize with your people less than before. So interestingly, we worked with a startup from Berlin called Planetly, and the startup is creating a carbon management platform. So automatically calculating carbon emissions from organizations. And what they do is they just have separate meetings for social conversations. So for example, each Wednesday, there would be at 2 o'clock a virtual coffee meeting, and people could just log in, right, and share what they currently are doing in a private time, right? So this meeting was meant to socialize, even remotely. While other meetings, many of them didn't take place. We kept things asynchronous, right? So we would have a shared document where everyone shares information. And most of the time, we didn't have many meetings at all. And it worked really well. But for some of the other things, and this is where really, again, the management has to come in and to understand, how can I make sure that people in my team still feel connected? In the other company I was before, in agency, people organized online FIFA games. Sure, it works as well. Whatever works for you and your team to keep them together, just try it out. And so the asynchronous communication is probably 50% of the success of the teams I've seen. And what doesn't work is really saying we just repeat the same meetings as we had before online. It will just not be the same. And when it comes to tools, I'm actually curious, and maybe you can share some of the tools you use, or at least you like to use, in a comment. Feel free to do it right now. In my experience, we're still in the beginning of seeing more and better software to enable online and remote collaboration. Honestly, I'm still not happy with most of them. We're actually working on our own software right now, which we hope to solve some of the issues we've witnessed. But as a main lesson learned there is, the companies who do it well, they really try to have as little different tools as possible. So that's key here, right? Think, what do you really need, and keep it to a minimum. Otherwise, having a bunch of different user credentials across different places, different user experience, etc., is not a good practice. And I'm like, before we jump into the questions, I feel like one thing we all should do in teams is be transparent about that. It's a journey, right? And it's a new thing which we all have to try things out and adapt to it and figure out what works and what doesn't. So we all probably should, as for team leaders who are here, now share with the team that, look, let's learn together. It's our journey, so we can all share what works for us and what doesn't, and make things better. It's going to be a learning process. I mean, I imagine that people 50 years ago, or when the office culture started, that was weird to go and commute to a normal office and sit with people who never met before for 8 hours a day or more.
I imagine it took some time to get adapt to it. And it's kind of like the same thing right now. So, you know, we all have to try things out. And it's great that we do this kind of events to share best practices and to support each other. Because that's going to be totally normal in a couple of years. Like we will not, you know, it's not going to be something special anymore. All right, now back to you. Who, you know, maybe we can, if there are some questions, I would be happy to answer those.
Thank you, Stan. So this was some, you know, revolutionary comments, I would say, particularly from what I hear from other people who are very reluctant to give up their traditional meeting structures and very much try to find a replacement for them to kind of, you know, reproduce the same thing virtually. At least for me, a whole bunch of questions popped up, but it's not my place to ask questions, it's my place to moderate. Mark, you have another question, please. Actually, this is a comment, right? As if I read closely.
Yeah, it's a comment. I was just referring to Stan's invitation to share mixes of tools that we might be using for meetings.
Thank you so much for sharing this right here. We will definitely collect any suggestions. I have an asterisk from Veronica.
Hi, so thanks a lot for the presentation. It was really great to hear. For me, one question would be, as you said, for example, there's the possibility to have coffee breaks. At my work, we had this virtually coffee breaks too, but we were always wondering how can we, like if you would meet in person in a group, you would have different topics people talk about, and you maybe talk with one person to the one thing and then you listen, oh, the other one is speaking about something interesting too, and you just switch. So virtually, it's always just possible that one person is speaking, or you have those separated breakout rooms, but then you don't know what the other groups are talking about. So do you have any solution for that?
I don't, sadly. I only the only solution I know is that even the companies like Basecamp, who started as a remote company 20 years ago, even them are at least once or twice a year, they bring the people together from all the different countries, because this personal interaction, for 20 years, they haven't cracked that, or they haven't been able to completely replace them online. And I'm not sure if we will ever be able to replace those intimacy, the social warmth completely online. So it works partially, obviously, but I still feel we need some sort of place to connect from time to time in person, in real life.
Thank you.
I've seen another question from Vivian. Are there open source free software and data secure alternatives to Zoom, Mural and Mentimeter?
So wait, is the question about Zoom or more? Oh, there's
she listed a number of things.
I mean, obviously there are several alternatives to pretty much everything. If you try to Google to Mural, there's another software called Muro, for example, but they all are pretty much similar. I'm not sure, you know, if how many of them are more or less data secure. Like, you know, we keep reading in the press if some data breach is happening, and I hope that those companies address those right now a lot more than before, because the stakes are a lot higher.
I have Carla, you posted something and you said you don't have it with you, but can you speak or can you not speak at all because you don't have audio? Please just write a little note.
user interview testing designs with it with a very old CEO of a very traditional German company via Zoom. And it worked really well. It was, he really liked it. We liked it too. So I don't think it's, it's definitely, I think it's less about, some companies like Microsoft might be a lot more technical, so they might get used to it and others not. But I don't think it's about that. I really think it's more about attitude, because I know just in my personal life, there are some friends and colleagues who have teams and who have managers who absolutely disagree with this and who absolutely disagree with remote work, and they say it should not be the case. So, there is definitely some resistance there. But I also know cases where companies after Corona said, look, even if we told our people to come to the office every day, some of them will just quit, right? So a lot of people like that. So, if there's more demand, companies' cultures will change. And I will share a blog post afterwards, which I'm writing about this topic. Siemens as a company will send a bunch of their people working remote. So many companies going through this change right now. So I do feel that's definitely not going away.
Okay, thank you. It's almost time to move on to our next input, but I see there's a lot of need to discuss later on. I would like to state Carla's last post or read it out to you. Because it sounds really interesting. She remembers a solution from a startup from Berlin, probably, and Stan's nodding, where you can move your own avatar across different tables. And
I do remember. They changed the name recently, 2 weeks ago or something. And I was taking part in a conference that this tool. I found it kind of strange. It's simply maybe because it was a different name from the other town. I'll look it up and share afterwards. So yeah, I do feel there's still progress to be made here because the tool, I don't know, for me it was kind of weird.
Okay. Thank you so much. There will be a lot of room later to discuss this further, because this is really what we're looking for, people sharing all their ideas and experiences and different tools they've tried and made good and bad experiences with. But now we have one more formal input from our colleague Nicole from Heidelberg. She's in a transdisciplinary lab, and they've done a really interesting survey. Nicole.
Yeah, thank you, Susanne. Hello, everybody. I try to share my presentation now. Okay, so hopefully this works. Okay. Yeah, hello, everybody. First, I would like to thank Susanne and Michaela very much for the invitation. I'm happy to share some of the results of the survey on experiences with virtual events from March and April this year. About myself, I'm a geographer working at Heidelberg University, and there we conduct research and teaching on topics mainly related to climate change. So this is my focus. We combine methods from the natural and also the social sciences and involve actors from outside academia. Transdisciplinarity. And also I work freelance for the mobility platform of ETH Zurich, where I am involved in the project on reducing emissions from air travel, which is headed by Susanne Gerlinger. So how can we successfully operate international academic activities without having such an impact on the system? This question has been on our minds for several years now, because you are here, the community, which focuses on that. And in spring 2017, ETH Zurich was one of the first universities to launch a structured approach to reduce emissions from air travel. The approach is called Stay Grounded, Connected, and I recommend anyone who is not yet familiar with the project to take a look at the website. ETH members have set themselves a reduction target and corresponding measures, And on the website, you can find a variety of information material. So on way to a travel decision, you go through some steps which you more or less reflect. And until March 2020, the main question was, do I want to participate? This was the initial question. But then the pandemic caused a situation in which we had to communicate almost exclusively with online tools. And at universities, we started what is known as emergency remote teaching. And I think it's very important to bring this into mind, that this is far away from a planned use of virtual tools in teaching. Now, the question is not only do I want to participate, but mainly am I able to participate? So this changed a lot. And in this situation, Susanne Görlinger, ETH Zurich flight reduction project, had the great idea to set up a survey to find out what people experience with the virtual tools. Of course, above all, to learn what this could mean for our topic of reducing air travel. In other words, whether there is a chance to continue the formats that have now been tried and tested also after Corona, whatever this means. So we wanted to find out what the participants of online meetings and conferences experience as positive and what as negative. We first asked whether the respondents were participants or organizers of the event. And then the questions were mainly about the evaluation of these events and the opinion about the future use of virtual exchange. In her bachelor thesis, Caroline Merrim, she was working at the TdLab Geography with me at Heidelberg University. She prepared and published the first results of this survey. And the QR code guides you directly to the questionnaire, which is still open and by now in an updated version. So we are more than happy to receive further response. Please feel free to share your experiences there. Also, our survey started early in the Corona crisis. We wanted to find out whether the discussion of these topics, virtual exchange topics, had already started before. So the study of the beginning was very crucial for us. And we analyzed this via Twitter analysis. We searched for a selection of keywords that refer to our topics of interest. And we used a large data set on Twitter posts during this critical time. And this large data set, every tweet contains Corona, COVID-19, and these keywords. And we analyzed how many of them also contain words like distance learning, online lecture. You can find it in the word cloud here. So the results show clearly that there was a surge of the frequency of these keywords around mid-March 2020, so just after the start of our survey. This finding proves that our survey started at the right time to capture the advent of these issues in the public discourse, obviously triggered by the immediate need for virtual formats during the lockdown phase of the first Corona wave. And one method for the analysis of Twitter data is the so-called sentiment analysis. The aim is to deduce from language which emotions the tweet conveys. There are negative, positive, and neutral moods. The vast majority of the tweets in our data set we examined were neutral. This is probably related to the fact that, especially in these early days of the emergency use of virtual tools, it was often a matter of communicating information. For example, the information that a certain event will now take place online, and not so much an emotion about that. So now we will focus on a selection of results from the questionnaire on experience from virtual events. The left panel here shows the frequency distribution of the number of participants in the events for which we received response. Most events were relatively small, with less than 30 participants, but much larger events also were reported on. Another important and at first sight maybe surprising result is illustrated on the right side. Most respondents were actually quite positive about the virtual events. Only very few responses indicated strong dissatisfaction with the online events. But we not only wanted to find out whether the people liked the virtual formats or not, so even more we were interested in what the main reasons are why such events are mostly perceived positively. This can be assessed from the responses received to the open questions in the questionnaire. Thus, we analyzed the main pros and cons that respondents mentioned in their answers. Let's first look at the positive aspects. What did you like about the virtual format of the event? Here, a selection of the most frequent responses. No need to attend physically, no need to travel, time saving, very important. More people can attend, good interaction between speakers and audience, efficient sharing, lots of information, high quality discussions, reduction of CO2 emissions. Research and education during COVID-19 is still possible. Recordings are available afterwards. Presentation slides are more clearly readable. Submitting written questions and comments. And this is, I think, interesting, democratization of knowledge and family-friendly. Very good networking experience is the most frequent stated aspects. And the other side, what did you dislike about the virtual format of the event? Lack of personal interactions and social signals. We already talked about that. No possibility to participate in coffee break discussions, bad video quality, technical issues. It's more difficult to focus. Pretty formal format, difficult to have one-to-one discussions in parallel with a big group. We have personal chat here. Limitations due to time difference. Lorenz already talked about that. The poster session was less successful than a real one, and you cannot socialize network the way you could do in on-site meetings. And one further question was, would you generally like to have more virtual events offered instead of present events? With this question, we aimed at capturing a perspective on the potential for future online events, of course. 75% chose yes, and said because reduce CO2 emissions, time saving, virtual events broaden access, cost saving, family friendly, makes learning more accessible. So looking at the results of our survey from the perspective of flight reduction programs, it is interesting to note that the responses cover all three dimensions of sustainability, not only the aspect of CO2 reduction. The participants of the virtual events not only saw ecological benefits, but also clearly identified other advantages in the economic and social sectors. These co-benefits can be very important, I think, motivating features of virtual exchange formats for the future. We can thus learn a lot from the intense experience with such formats that the corona crisis has triggered. And the shift of behavior from frequent flying towards virtual exchange does not have to be framed exclusively as a renouncement for the sake of the environment. It can also be positively seen as a gain in social and economic terms. So what could a new kind of closeness, I call this, look like? We have seen that there are a number of positive starting points, but also some challenges, of course, mainly concerning the lack of personal interactions and social signals, the reduced possibility to participate in coffee break discussions and other informal events. Besides the results shown so far, and I think this corresponds to that what Stan already talked about, I found the bachelor thesis of Caroline Merrim also be very inspiring by discussing the results in the context of communication science. For example, the choice of an appropriate medium or format may depend on the type of interaction, one-to-one, one-to-many, or many-to-many. Moreover, the communication differs with regard to its contents and goals. For example, whether it is a pure transfer of information, a personal exchange, or for example, negotiation. negotiation where it is important to build trust between the involved parties. The media richness theory distinguishes the complexity of tasks and the complexity of the medium or format. There is a range of optimal conditions for communication where the two match both oversimplification and overcomplication are not beneficial. I'm not an expert in this field, but I think these aspects could offer opportunities for community, like here our Stay Grounded community. So this is, I think, a very inspiring aspect of this bachelor thesis. So to briefly summarize, at the beginning of March 2020, the mobility platform of ETH Zurich and the TdLab Geography, Heidelberg University, jointly launched this questionnaire to collect experiences. And also the initial period of the switch from presence to digital was certainly nerve-wracking for many. The results testify to great openness and many positive experiences. So the most frequently mentioned reason for this positive state is time saving, and also, of course, the avoidance of CO2 emissions. But this sounds, in my opinion, like a shining example of a so-called co-benefit. So let's use this information and experiences. And this little project is embedded in the Stay Grounded Informatics project at ETH Zurich and the TdLab Geography. And if you are interested in more details, the bachelor thesis, unfortunately, only in German available because the study program, bachelor program in geography at Heidelberg University is held in German. So the bachelor thesis is also in German, but the QR code guides you to the download of the entire bachelor thesis. Thank you very much. And yeah, I very much looking forward for the next part of this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. We will not have a dedicated Q&A session here, but we'll move on to the general interaction right away. Nicole, maybe you can check out Carla's comment in the chat. And if you have any further questions or follow-ups, please do contact Nicole and or her colleagues after this webinar session. Let's take a deep breath. This already has been a whole bunch of information, a whole bunch of discussions, and now we are obviously interested to hear more of your experiences. And we've already had some hints here and there in your comments that there are plenty of experiences and questions. We have thought about sort of 3 main questions to structure the discussion, but we're definitely not married to those should the general interest take us in one way or the other. But what we would like to first do is really go into your own positive and negative experiences with virtual meetings, and also collaborative tools, obviously. Maybe also facilitation methods. We've heard that a lot of people are interested in how to facilitate virtual meetings. We will not avoid all of them, Stan, I guess. You might have some too. So the facilitation aspect is definitely very interesting too. We've asked Robin, a colleague, to also provide a short experience statement to get the discussion started. And please feel free to already, post your asterisk if you want to speak up, or post a question if you want to speak up right after him. Robin.
Okay, thanks, Susan. Yeah, thanks also that I'm able to speak a bit about my experience. I think it will be very different for anybody of you. So I think for us, it's particularly interesting because I believe we could have switched to a totally virtual company already, I guess, 2 years ago. And yeah, I'm working for Climate Kick, which is an organization that fosters climate innovation in Europe. And actually, I just tried to calculate a bit like the number of flights we were having before this Corona thing. And I estimate it was about 5,000 flights per year going from like an average distance from Milan to Amsterdam. And it's quite crazy that now actually we just continue to work to work as it was without flying, which is so great. And I think the biggest learning there, that we will never go back to flying again as much. Maybe we will again for like seeing each other once or twice a year or something like this, but we will never go back to this massive amount of flying again. I think what made it particularly easy for us is that we are an orchestrating organization. So we orchestrate actually partners who conduct more the work on the ground, which made it fairly easy to actually guide the partner and to orchestrate the work of those various partners. You can imagine that in an innovation project, we have various partners working on something, and we orchestrate and we try to nudge them to go to the right direction in terms of building right value proposition, finding out what the challenges are. And so I think that made it quite easy, but it was still very difficult for us to at first hand, but I think a few tools helped us. So I mean, we started to use really Miro intensively, Zoom, Teams, other tools, more interactive tools. And we had, for example, a whole company event, all staff meeting, which we would usually have had offline, meeting physically, for 280 people, just now online using Miro, guiding through the day, having somebody who uses Zoom, also plays in music, interactive music during the breaks, having a coffee corner in the Miro section where you could go into a breakout room and you could talk like in real life. So I think it was quite a good experience. And now, of course, what we also try to do, I guess, is to take as much as we can in terms of learning from this experience. So I'm in the company, I'm working more on the learning side, learning with schools. So what it made us switch to is really to think of how can we do a blended approach in terms of learning and education. What kind of tools can we use online and would complement very well the offline activities which would be conducted with our partners. I think me, from my own experience, I when facilitated those things, what I always try to do is as well still include some offline elements in there. So having people, for example, going around their house, finding a nice object that they never thought of, for example, and that was always staying in the same corner, but they never really were aware of, and to bring this and to show it to the other people afterwards, to kind of get facilitation going and still to have them move as well, because I think that's another thing, like when you need to sit in front of the computer all the time, you really get more tired. So yeah, I think that's just a few of my experience. I'll be very happy to know from others, like how they have done it within their company. Yeah.
Thank you, Robin. So please, everyone, consider yourselves experts. So we did not invite people who know things better or more of them than you. We just tried to provide you examples, and we're really hoping for you to share your experiences now, similar to Robin just did, or in a shorter version of what Stan did, for example. What are your experiences? How do your social interactions virtually work or not work out?
I can also say something if you want. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Hello,
I did not jump over an asterisk. No. Okay. Yeah, just I really agree with what you say, Robin, that actually I was also amazed of what we can do without flying, that we did not do without flying before. But yeah, I fully agree with many things you also discussed in the conference, but I have a big question I cannot solve. And I think Nicole brought me a part of the answer, but I think it could be interesting to have your opinion on that. So I'm Leo, and I work in TdLab Zurich. I'm a researcher. I work actually mostly in Eastern Africa, from Zurich. So I'm in a kind of cooperation setting, and I work with the South. And actually, already before Corona, I'm a proponent of less flying, not no flying, but less flying, so better flying, so better stays. Instead of flying there like many people do for 1 week there and come back and whatever, I say, okay, I go there and I stay for 1 month or 6 weeks. And already there, I saw with my colleague, there is an incompatibility of some people with that, because I mean, I'm fine, but other people say, yeah, sorry, I have kids. After a week on Saturday, I have to go back. So there is already kind of a big change depending on your lifestyle of what you do that. And I noticed, like also Robin said, I mean, for many conference, Hangouts and everything, actually Zoom and everything works quite well. And also for what I called work distribution, what you updates and whatever, okay, we did this, can you do like this, can you do like that? That's everything fine. Where it doesn't work, it's for what I could call a kind of genuine interdisciplinary co-production. And the specificity of this thing is that some tasks in some projects are, I would say, so complex that it pushes a majority of the participants out of the comfort zone. And when you have a majority, a critical mass of people out of the comfort zone, media support, whatever Zoom you have, does not work anymore. That's my experience. And Nicole brought this picture with the graph of complexity and richness of media. And you see that's, yeah, the top right, I don't know, you have in mind this picture. I made a screenshot. You can see it. Oh, I cannot do that. I cannot share the screen. Anyway, so for me, there is a kind of impossibility of having the necessary richness to address some tasks that are very complex for many people in interdisciplinary context. Because when you put different, I mean, everybody has to go out of the comfort zone, and this is where it does not work. And yeah, it came to the point that actually I will soon go back after a 7-month break because the complex aspect of the project do not work. So this is something I don't know how to solve. I liked also the Mark, you also put this kind of avatar. Maybe in 5 years we will have a kind of a virtual self that can also don't speak only my words and my image and my voice, but also my psychological cue I'm giving you like this, or my body language. So I don't know, but there is a kind of core that I cannot address. So I will be happy for any suggestion you will have or sharing of experience on that.
Thank you, Leon. Carla is posting intensively, yet she can't speak up. She says, concerning avatar applications, the mentioned tool was just using a circle with my photo, which I could move to the different tables. So much more flexible than, for example, breakout rooms to join and leave easily. Anybody else have any suggestions for Leon or any other experiences you would like to share? Sean, could you maybe elaborate on the link that you just posted, or is it not that pertinent?
The link is a bit of a joke link in terms of you can now get robots that drive around. You can drive them from home with an iPad attached to them. But potentially that would be an option for you, Leon. I suppose, so from our point of view, actually, coming back to some of the stuff that Stan was talking about coffee breaks, and it does link in with that, what you were saying, Leon, as well, in terms of complexity, but taking it back to even a team level. So we're a team of 25 within our department, and we work in the university, which has about 15,000 staff members. But when we're talking about even that social interaction and getting a coffee break organized, it's really difficult for people to interact socially in that context sometimes. And we started a weekly coffee break session, and it quickly tailored off from having 10, 15 people attend to 2 or 3 people to 1 person. And in that instance, actually you realize that's not necessarily the sort of interaction that people are looking for. What they're really looking for is how do you have those interactions where you're just walking past somebody's desk and you stop and you go, oh, actually, I wanted to talk to you about this, rather than something a bit more formal in the coffee break that isn't quite a formal meeting. So there's still that difficulty in overcoming that side of it, because okay, you can probably still do it on Teams in some ways. So you can say, well, I'm just going to call you randomly and you're not going to know about it until and that's me basically walking past your desk and saying, hello, I just wanted to stop in for a chat. But it's really difficult to know if somebody's free in that instance. So how can we build in that side of things? How can we overcome that, I suppose, to work out when people are free and we're not interrupting them virtually, because we can't see them anymore, and we know we don't get those cues anymore from people virtually, and I don't know what that might look like.
Very good point. Although I wonder whether we don't interrupt people often who are actually working focused in the analog. Then we punch in. Stan, you looked like you wanted to say something.
Yeah, it's definitely it's not a fast and a solution whatever works, and I don't think there's no 100% recipe which works for every team too. But what I've noticed as well is that, you know, in good healthy team cultures, people also use a lot of the chat tools and just, you know, post fun jokes, memes, whatever. And also, you know, when you kind of like have team meetings and you try to ask people, you know, figure out what kind of stuff, like let them at least talk what kind of things did they do last week, right? So you have some personal moments which people can afterwards, you know, write each other about and say, hey, how did it go with the tennis lesson last week? So, you know, at some point there's also just having a bit more information from each other would also help to spark new conversations. But a lot of good stuff, like what I see, you know, if like the good teams, you know, if they open the Slack channel, it's full of some crazy memes and jokes and videos which people send around and be silly about. And I think it's super important to have those too.
Anna, you would like to make a statement, I see. And then Mark.
Yes, thank you. I have two small things that I found out were quite useful or funny at our meetings. So one was in a actually Stay Grounded meeting where we had a hybrid meeting, so people joining online, and we had one of those, I don't even know how they're called, but the cameras where the online participants can actually move the camera towards the direction themselves, towards the direction of the person that is speaking. So they, as you, when you're sitting, you move to the other side to watch the person that is speaking. They could, they could somehow move the camera towards the person that's speaking. And they said that was very helpful because they felt like they can actually do something and not just sit in front of their laptop. And another thing, maybe a bit different, but also related to this doing something, is that in Big Blue Button, you have this option where people can, where you have this virtual flip chart. And I experienced that in hybrid meetings, people started painting and doing stuff on this virtual flip chart and were quite, I think it helped people to stay focused on the desk, because when I'm sitting and watching a meeting, I start scribbling my notes and so on. And here, people started doing this together. Actually, they were starting to paint something together, and it's funny on the one hand side, and on the other hand side, it keeps people focused on the desk. And so that were just two small things. And the other thing, another question I have is that I think what we as an international network at the moment are facing is the problems of time zones. It was mentioned already in the beginning with the time difference between Davos and Japan. But we are still wondering what to do when you have people really joining from all over the world. We have a network meeting very soon, and it will be people from Asia and from Latin America and from Europe and from New Zealand joining. And you basically don't have a time zone that fits for everyone. And there's probably no perfect solution for this, but I was just wondering whether anyone here has experiences with this.
Thank you, Anna. Mark and then Agnes.
Hi, I just wanted to say again, I mean, fantastic presentations, really interesting discussion. I wanted to respond specifically to Leon's point about the complex challenges that he's facing. We certainly don't face such complex issues, but we do interact a lot. We work a lot of the interface between science and policy, and we're interacting a lot with policymakers. We're interacting with people who don't have an awful lot of time to be sitting for extended periods in front of a computer. So what we do is that we tend to design, we design processes based very much upon this thing that Nicole mentioned, which are the blended approaches. And in particular, and this goes back to something that Robin also mentioned, is we try to combine offline activities, so to set up activities which are run offline, then to link them to asynchronous activities. And we actually work with very, very simple tools such as Google Docs, for example. We run consultations over an extended period of time, maybe a week to 10 days, and then we bring everything together with a short sort of, creative, active, synchronous activity. And this blended approach we find very effective in engaging particularly actors who wouldn't necessarily commit to even more than a 2-hour online virtual meeting. And somehow we can also manage some of this complexity. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. Agnes.
Hi, I don't really have any experiences to offer to the last question. I only wanted to add another difficulty that I thought of while I was listening to the stories about how different teams function or do not function if they open, for example, a Slack channel or a space for informal communication. I'm observing that one problem dimension of this might be the fact that when we have just groups virtually, there is no hierarchy implied, or sometimes there is hierarchy implied in one sense. So we have one person who's managing the meeting and then participants, but the more complicated social hierarchies, for lack of a better term, are not represented. So if I post something in this chat room, it will be visible equally to all the people there, and it's as if I was sending it to all of them. And if I'm using my own example, for example, if I was posting something in the group chat of my research group, there are things that I would send to all my fellow PhD students, but would not send to our professors. But if everyone is in the same group, and the same is for the virtual coffee breaks. And even if you are all in the same room, and then you can say something to the person next to you and the person next to them, and it's clear you're talking to them, and that's more appropriate. And even if the other person is in the same room and they can technically hear you, it's still appropriate because you didn't direct it at them, but there's more of a social distance there. And I think for these subtleties in interaction, we don't have the means, except for opening lots of different groups with different membership constellations. So yeah, I have no solutions for this one either. I just wanted to point out that might be one of the reasons underlying the problems that we're observing.
Thank you. Who else? So I'm getting a bit confused with the talking points. Carla posted again. She pointed out Big Blue Button, and she says that they were actually having sort of a pub situation on that. That's interesting. And she's also recommending Kipp.Kollektiv, who are using different tools in very joyful ways. And she also posted a link there. So we will collect all of this, obviously, but I also would like to bring it in since she cannot speak up. Anybody else would like to share an experience or a difficulty? I think it's very important, like Agnes did, to also collect all the challenges that we are facing and that we need to overcome sooner or later.
I would have one more thing also. I don't know. Can you hear me? Oh, I just have it muted. Sorry. I don't remember if it's Nicole or Stan speaking about that, but we do not about the deficit of attention. for me, the big issue I have also on virtual, and you can just see it now in front of you. We are 27 participants. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 cameras on. It means we have only 4 persons that are willing to show themselves. In a meeting, in a real life meeting, I cannot blend myself out and just put a kind of picture like this and say, oh, sorry, guys, I have to check my phone or whatever. I cannot do that.
Well, I guess you can.
Now I can do that. It's not, please don't get me wrong. It's not something it's just what I want to show you is just something I regularly observe. So for me, for instance, when we have a conference or something like meetings, I try really to force people to switch on the cameras because for me, it's very hard to connect when we don't see each other. So, and it's a very issue because with students, people are just used to come to Zooms and just like somebody, I think it's Nicole was saying, just saying like, okay, well, we just read the emails and whatever. Oh yeah, there is this and that. So I think also a big issue that I fight with in this remote work is the deficit of attention, and it starts on the way, how do we show off in a meeting? So I don't know how to motivate people more to be seen. Yes, sometimes I also look, or sometimes I yawn or whatever, but I don't know, it's a part of that I can transfer on the virtual reality. And for me, there is already there a huge barrier. Sorry, please, nobody has to take that personally. It's just a remark I have when I work like this.
I do a little bit because I did want to encourage people to switch on their videos initially, and I didn't. We have several comments. First Stan, then Sean, and then Agnes.
Yeah, so Leon, great point, absolutely. And it just remembered me of the same situation where you have, when you have a meeting in person and people come and open the laptop and just stare on the laptop or look on their phone. It's kind of like the same thing, right? You do see them, but they're not really present at the meeting. So the thing which helps at those cases is just have clear policies, right? So when you establish as a team and I said, look, if we have a virtual meeting, everyone has to have the camera on. And if it's not important, then just don't have the meeting and send it around, I guess.
Sean.
So I agree in part that the video is important. However, I mean, we all have it that we have so many meetings. Maybe we have it at the minute anyway. That there's so many meetings that sometimes actually we need to be able to switch off from having people look at us. It's one of those where, not that I'm doing something else when I'm turning my video off necessarily, but sometimes I just feel like I'm not particularly. People don't need to focus on me at the minute, so why should I have my video on? That's part of it. And also sometimes, and I've experienced it in the last few weeks because I moved house and my internet connection was actually really poor for 3 weeks. So being able to switch my video off was really useful for that in that instance. But knowing that people maybe would prefer to have it on all the time is interesting. I know it's different, and as Stan was saying, maybe having a clear policy saying for this meeting we need your video on because actually we need to see that interaction. But with, as you say, with 28, 30 people, it's having videos on isn't necessarily going to be useful because where do you focus your attention? Having so many people is actually maybe too overwhelming. So I don't know what the right answer is. Do you say, okay, this meeting we're going to have these 9 people and you have to have your cameras on and that's it. But next week it'll be a different 9 people. I don't know, is there a right number of people to have videos on for?
Agnes, thank you, Sean.
And
then Veronica.
I really disagree on this point. I'm actually going to I'm a speaker tomorrow at an event, and I'm going to have my camera off, and it's vastly uncomfortable. But it's for me, this is a privacy issue that I think is under considered. And for me, my personal policy is clear that if a meeting is recorded and uploaded anywhere, then my camera will be off. So I would like people to consider this point. If there is a policy, you have to turn your camera on. I would like there to be also a policy, then it cannot be streamed and it cannot be uploaded and it cannot be recorded. Because, so I mean, to go too deeply into the background of this would be difficult. I guess also different people have privacy issues for different reasons. In my case, it's just that I find it, I don't want to be identifiable on CCTV, for example, if avoidable. So I don't know, ever since I was a teenager and people were telling me not to upload pictures of myself on Facebook, it's been personal choice to keep my face off the internet, especially when it's associated also with my name, so that it won't be possible for algorithms to help people identify pictures of myself. And this may be a paranoid position. On the other hand, we have this internet, we have artificial intelligence, and governments change, and we don't know what's happening with our data right now. So I think that's something we should be careful of. And we should really also be careful with accusations of, oh, you have your camera off, you're doing something else at the same time, and it's being disrespectful. So I would like for us to have more nuanced social norms about that.
Thank you, Agnes. Very important point. Just got me thinking again. I tend to think about these things and then forget again, but it is really important. Thank you for pointing that out. Veronica.
I agree with Leon on the one hand that it really helps to be focused if the cameras are on. But on the other hand, for me, it's kind of weird to always see myself. Because if I would be in a normal meeting, like not virtually, I wouldn't sit in front of a mirror. And so on the one hand, it helps. On the other hand, it distracts me a lot to just watch myself and always look like, okay, how do I look actually? So I don't really know why there is not really the possibility to see everyone except oneself. But yeah, somehow I think in most program like software, it doesn't work. But maybe you know something else.
Thank you, Veronica. Agnes just pointed out you can hide your own view, so you don't have to look at yourself all the time. Michaela, you are next on the speakers list.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a bit to this video discussion. Like at StackGrounded, we have sort of an agreement that if we are talking about emotional issues, like the check-in at the beginning, and also when it's more about also like the really see the face of one another in the communication, if that's really important, then we switch it on. And then very often we but also switch it off because then we are only looking at the minutes all the time. It doesn't really make sense to have the camera on. So I think it's really very context specific when camera makes sense and not. And of course, everybody has to feel good about that. And yeah, I just want to agree with Veronica on the problem of seeing myself. I hate it. I really have to find a way to switch that off. And actually, there was a study I read somewhere that also your the relationship to yourself changes if you see yourself all the time in virtual communication. So I think this might even have psychological impacts on us if we are seeing ourselves all the time, maybe. Yeah, just a quick remark from my side.
Thank you, Michaela. Yeah, the long-term outcomes of this whole change of communication is a wholly different thing that we probably will not be discussing in detail today. Stan, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, just wanted to mention that I feel like it's a beautiful discussion showing that really what does work for one team should necessarily not apply and work for the other team. And you know, it's our job to figure out what works for everyone, where your team is engaged and happy and comfortable doing everything. And I just wanted to share another example with WordPress, and you can Google it. It's really interesting, sharing how one team is really doing something completely different. So in their case, the CEO, for all people they hire, he's the first person who screens all the applicants, and the entire interview until the end is all via chat. There is no calls, there's no video calls. And the reason he's saying is, like, we as a remote company, we write 99% of the time, and we speak maybe 1% of the time. And I, as a CEO, I'm as a hiring manager, I don't even want to see and have any bias towards the candidate. So he said, look, I can't shut it off. I can't shut it off if I see, you know, a certain age or a certain race, that we all have biases. So in their case,
he said, look, I just want to, I will do all the interviews in written form and shut it off completely. So I found it really interesting because I think no one is doing it in this way, but it really works for them in a good case. And they hire then people who are really good in writing things down and not necessarily speaking via camera in a meeting, right? Just wanted to share this one too.
Thank you, Stan. So I'm having a look at the time, and I would like to post one more question, or pose one more question, not post it actually. And that is, how do we keep the momentum going? How do we make our new practices stick? Well, first of all, they are not sticking yet, right? So we need to get them there anyway. But are there any ideas? Because we don't have that many, other than, you know, sort of forcing people a little bit through regulations and policies, how to make this last post-corona, when we're able to fly again. Agnes, this was not an asterisk, right?
It was actually, it just
Oh,
accidentally came out as more a kiss emoji, sorry. It was
no
not
worries.
as harassment. So can I go first?
Yes, please.
I also find this is a super important question and a difficult one, and I don't really know, but I have the feeling that the justice argument is actually gripping in many places. So where there have been testimonies of, so I mean, the discussion has been going on for a while, right? About how, well, if we did it virtually, then more people would be able to attend, and it would be more independent of where you are from and where you are residing and how much money you have and whether you have carrying responsibilities or whether you are disabled. But now we actually, at least it's been my perception, there are actually testimonials of people who have said about various events, hey, it's been great for me to be able to be here because I wouldn't have been able to come otherwise. And I have been in a webinar where they said, or in a conference where the organizing team noted afterwards, wow, we had far more participation from women than we normally have in this format. Because for some reason, apparently they felt more comfortable asking their questions in chat. And I was at a party, like a virtual party, so totally different dimension, where two people said, well, I'm normally super introverted and I hate these after parties to these webinar things, but here I actually felt quite comfortable and included. So I think maybe this is something we can capitalize on and make even more visible, because that will remain after the virus is there. And it's maybe a more direct way that people can feel that they're making a difference than the very far removed climate change aspect.
Yes, very good point. And I think this has come up every now and then in the background, that the participatory justice aspects are definitely important to consider. Sean, you wanted to make a statement.
Yeah, I agree with that to some extent, and it was talked about earlier that yes, it's not just a carbon saving, there's a cost saving and there's a social element to it as well. So 100% agree that it's all across those three. But I'm going to be the sort of, I can never remember what they're called. Anyway, sort of have a think about it from the other side. Yes, we're talking about, yes, there's better inclusion, but it still means that people are excluded, those that don't have technological access necessarily. So we still have to be wary about that side of things. And I'm not just talking about on a global scale, I'm talking on a local scale as well. There's still people in Edinburgh, for example, that don't have access to technologies that might assist them in this, or might not have the skills to be able to use that. We were aware of the skills gap in that instance. So although virtual meetings are very useful and definitely do include a lot more people, there's definitely people that still miss out and maybe miss out more because it's digital. So we need to find a way of making sure it's accessible to everybody equally. And I don't know, I don't have the answer to that, because in some ways, whichever way you're going to do it, somebody's always going to lose out. And how do we make sure that the fewest people possible lose out, or that, and without sounding harsh, how do we make sure that different people lose out in different formats so that everybody has an opportunity in some format over the course of maybe a year, for example? I don't know what the answer is.
Thank you, Sean, for showing us the other side of the coin, or pointing it out to us. I'm aware we only have 3 minutes left. I would still like to point out Sarah Clayton's contributions in the chat. She shared a Zoom bombing experience and some interesting links. We will definitely, if that's okay, share that as well as part of the webinar summary. But I think apart from that, as there was no further asterisk for people wanting to speak up, I'm just checking the chat. This is why I'm a bit distracted. It's definitely something to learn to do better. I would like to hand over to Michaela, who will also be the person to collect any kind of links, resources you might want to share, who will also make sure the slides are available, and who I will definitely also talk about how we post the recordings with all the videos on and showing. Okay, thank you so much. It was really nice chatting from my side. It was really easy to moderate. Thanks for all the good contributions. Over to you, Michaela.
Yeah, hello everyone, and thank you very much to everyone who participated. I think there were really great inputs by the ones we have invited and also by the ones who were participants. I think it's something that we all are confronted with every day, and yeah, thank you very much for this great discussion. There will be further webinars for organizations done by Stay Grounded, also resources coming up. So we hope you sign up for our newsletter and stay informed. I would also ask you to fill in a small feedback form. I will post it, the link in the chat right now, so we can learn how to improve. And yeah, as I promised before, I will also make a summary of this whole discussion and will yeah, keep you informed about what Stay Grounded is doing. I think that's all for me and from us. And thank you very much. Have a nice evening, and I hope we all stay in touch and stay grounded. Goodbye. Good evening.